Welcome to Holy Trinity to 1719 for a virtual tour of the building and the conservation work that we're carrying out to make the building ready for use again. Holy Trinity is a very special building. It's 300 years old. It was built in 1719. First church service was September 1719, but over time there's been various problems with it, and it now is in need of a lot of TLC, which is what we're doing right now. So we're here at the rear of the church now. I just wanted to stop here and show you some of the work we're doing to the exterior walls. So you can see on this side we've got the apse, which was actually built onto the church later. So the main church was built and then the first rector built the apse on the end. And that has caused problems because the apse isn't very tied into the building very well, so it's kind of moving away from the building. And because it's doing that, that's caused problems with the stained glass windows. So months ago now, last year, we took the stained glass windows out. They're protected and they're packaged up and they go to a specialist conservator to be repaired, and then they'll be brought back and put back in. But it still leaves us with the problem of what we do with the walls. And this is the same issue really, not just in the apse, but across the whole building. You can see the bricks, first of all, are very small if you think about what modern bricks look like. These are handmade bricks and they're sort of less high. They're smaller than a modern brick, and they're all ever so slightly different because they're handmade, so they come out slightly different colours, slightly different, more texture on them, slightly different shapes. Between the bricks we've got the mortar, and when this building was first built it would have been lime mortar, and lime mortar is an amazing thing, and we understand a lot more now than we did even 20-30 years ago about what lime mortar does. Lime mortar lets a building breathe, it lets the moisture in and out of the building, and as we said before, this is one of the biggest problems with this building, is getting it to breathe, water to come in and out. So lime mortar would have been originally in, but over time the mortar fails. It's supposed to do that, and it drops out, and people repoint, and at different points in time they've repointed with very, very hard mortar, cement-based mortar, and that stops the building breathing. The water gets it into it and it can't get out through the mortar, so it pushes its way out through the bricks instead, and then the bricks start breaking. So if you have a look all around at the walls, particularly this bit behind me actually, you can see where we've scraped the mortar out of the beds, and the bricks which have got the scratches on, like these ones, these are the ones that we've identified to take out because they're so damaged that they need to be replaced, and you can see on some of them it's very easy to see how damaged they are. So we make a decision about every single individual brick. We try and retain as many of the original ones as we possibly can, but we take out any that are broken. So the stonemasons will come, they will very carefully, using hand tools, they don't use any machine tools, using hand tools, they take out these broken ones and they will be replaced with our bespoke handmade bricks that are sitting waiting over here. So we've got a pile of them over on this side. They've been made in York, handmade. Our apprentice went down and had a look to see what the process is, and saw it right from digging the clay out of the ground, putting them in the moulds and firing them, and we had to order 16,000 of those, and they will go back into the walls in those individual places where the bricks are so damaged. So we've just come up the ladder onto the scaffolding, and I've just stopped here because you can actually see what I was talking about down below. This is where the bricks have been put in, the new replacement bricks. These ones are the ones we've had handmade, bespoke to order, to replace the broken ones. So this area was fairly damaged, so they've had to take quite a lot of the original brickwork out and put these ones into place. And then this is new lime mortar between the bricks. There's a final stage to do where they'll come and point in between the bricks, and that will all be done by the stonemasons, and again all done by hand, which is one of the reasons buildings like this take so long, because there's just meters and meters and meters of repointing to be done, and it all just takes time. There's no shortcut to it, but it's quite nice. You can see that the replacement bricks are very similar in their kind of palette, their colour, they're certainly the same in terms of size, and that kind of textured sort of look you get on them. They blend in quite well with the old ones. So we're up on the scaffolding tower now, which is a bit of the building I guess people don't ever get really up close to, never really get to see, so it's a great privilege to be up here. This is the clock, so there's been some repairs are being done on the clock, and the pointers, handles have been taken off, so they were actually in quite a poor state of repair, so they've had to go away to be kind of overhauled and looked at and put back on. Clock's been repainted, but what I really came up here to show you was some of the stonework. So Holy Trinity is an unusual building. It's brick built but with stone, so I guess traditionally we often think of churches as stone buildings, but we've got both here. Some of the stonework is in perfectly good nick. It's been here for 300 years and it will last forever almost. Some of it was less good. So again, the architect goes round individually looking at the pieces of stone, seeing what state they're in, and any that are very damaged and beyond saving have to be replaced. So you can see here we've got some of the original stonework, and then we've got new pieces that have been put in. And these are carved by the stonemasons, so the specialist stonemasons working for the contractor. They do them all to the template of what was originally here, cut them, hand finish them, and then they're put into place, and you can see the mortar around them, and the mortar here between the bricks is the lime mortar at the mix that we've chosen for this building, and again that was specially selected. So you can see the difference, and it's about making like an honest repair, so we don't pretend that this is all 300 years old. What we do is we put in pieces of the same kind of material, but so that you can still see the difference, so you can see, yeah, that is new, but it's in line with the original design. It'll weather back a bit in colour as well, but you'll always be able to see that it's new. I always just think what's amazing when you see the people working on this, and they've got such attention to detail to get it exactly right, but these stones are so high up that from the ground you can kind of barely tell, but they get all of them absolutely right. And they chop out different amounts as well, so they always leave as much as they can, but they sort of chop out more or less depending on the condition of the stone, and then they put in the replacement piece and it has to fit in exactly. Okay, so we're right at the top now, top of the scaffolding, which is certainly a hidden bit of Holy Trinity, not somewhere where anybody gets to access often at all. The whole tower has been wrapped in scaffolding. The work on the tower is now nearly finished, so the scaffolding will be coming down in the next few weeks. There's not been a great deal to do up at the very, very top. There's the odd piece of replacement stone that we've got, and the lightning projection's already in place, so not a great deal to do up here, but the whole building has to be checked. One of the things with historic buildings is that often you don't really know what you're going to find until you get started. So just before we go into Holy Trinity, I've just stopped here so that you can have a look at something that was hidden for many, many years, and we think it was hidden by a notice board. So you can just see at the tops of the wall here, there's some little wooden pegs, which were probably to fix a notice board onto the front of the church, you know, times that things were happening, information board. That was really lucky for us because it's protected the original bricks and pointing behind that notice board. So when you look at this area here, you can see that the mortar between the bricks is quite thick, and it's a dark colour, and then on top of that it's got a light painted line, and that painted line is sort of narrower and really I guess smart looking, geometric looking, and that is called tuck pointing. Now tuck pointing is actually really rare for it to survive, and it has here, it has only survived because it's been hidden behind that notice board and it's been protected from the elements. It's probably original, and what we think is the sort of idea behind that. When this church was built, it was built fairly quickly, and it was built using materials that were available and that were relatively cheap, but throughout the building it was made to look much fancier than it actually was. So they made the materials look better than they really were, made it look kind of a higher quality building, and tuck pointing is one of the ways you can do that, because you can put your wall up very quickly, your joints don't need to be brilliant, you throw it all together, and then afterwards you come and you put the white lime mortar lines on that are much finer, and that makes it look like a fancier wall than you originally had. So we've come into Holy Trinity now, And all I can say is every time I come into this space, even though at the moment it's a work in progress, it's still an amazing space. It's really big, it's beautiful. And once the work's finished, the scaffolding's down, the windows are replaced, it's going to be really lovely in here. So this is the main nave. This is where people would have sat and worshipped. We've got the apse at the end there, which was added slightly later, around about 20 years after the building was originally completed. If you'd have been in here before the work started, it would look very different. There was wood panelling, oak panelling all the way around the walls, whereas now you can just see the bare brick behind. Walls were plastered above that. In the corner over here, there was a small chapel, Lady Chapel, and that's also a World War I war memorial. Now that's been taken out, and that was an unexpected thing, but it is going back in. So when the contractor started work, they took, one of the first jobs was to take up all the oak panelling from around the sides of the building and to take up all of the floor. The oak panelling has gone to a workshop and it's being cleaned, checked and overhauled. And it was such a process to do it. They had to take off every panel individually, they had to label them, they had to number them, and they will all be put back on in the right place. So that was all done by hand, and they're being conserved by hand, and then they'll go back in place. But when they got to this corner here with the War Memorial Chapel, they discovered that for various reasons it needed to come out completely, and part of that was that there wasn't really anything underpinning it, there was nothing holding it up. So where they decided that they needed to completely take it out, and again it's been taken out, it's being safely stored and looked after, and when the floors are completed and the support is in place underneath, it'll be put back in, and that will remain there as a space for kind of quiet reflection. So that'll be back in that corner. At the far end here, when the building's finished, the stained glass will be back in place. So that's all been taken to a conservation workshop and that's been worked on, but you'll be able to see the stained glass again and the colour will come flooding through that window. And that's the only stained glass we have in this building. It's a very plain building, it's post-Reformation, so the windows would always have been plain, and they will be replaced with just clear glass again. It's worth having a chat in here about the floor, because really this illustrates all of the problems that we're here in this building. So as I said, it was built in a puddle, so it's in a shallow depression, there's water under the floor. So we think in the early 1900s, possibly in the 1930s, the decision was taken that something needed to be done about this. They knew the water was coming up through the floor. So what we think people did back then, and it was done in totally good faith, they thought we need to stop this water. So they filled in the floor with rubble, concrete, rubbish, all sorts, filled in the floor, and then they put a layer of concrete on top of that, a layer of bitumen on top of that, and then floorboards on top of that. So the first job that the contractors had to do here, that the builders had to do, was not a pleasant job. They had to get all of that back out. So the floorboards were lifted, all of that concrete and rubble had to be broken up. It all had to be taken out the main door of the church. It all had to go out that one door. And they dug out tons and tons and tons of rubble. But what that now means is we've got a void at the bottom of the church, a gap. We've got airflow that now can be pulled from the outside of the church through the base of the walls and into that floor void. And then we've got a new floor been laid on top of it. And this has actually been one of the main jobs of our apprentice, Kane, who's one of the young people that we're training through this programme. So Kane has been part of the team constructing a new floor. So there's like a honeycomb system underneath so that air can flow through it. And then the floor joists, they're putting in all the services at the moment, the pipes and things. There will then be insulation and then underfloor heating and then a new flag floor on top of that. And that hopefully means that this church has a sustainable future as a new building. So it will be warm and it will be dry, but main thing is it'll be breathable, and that stops any further damage to the walls. So all that work we're doing to replace the bricks is worthwhile because it's not just going to be damp again and damaged again. So this is another bit of the building that nobody's really ever going to get access to again. So we're right up in the ceiling now, so the ceiling's right above me in the nave, standing on scaffolding boards. So these were put in to let the workers get on with the work on the ceiling. It's now been replastered, so they've done a beautiful job. But you'll see around the sides of the building, we've got some problem areas at the moment. So the plasterwork around the sides, this was one of the things which I can remember from coming to this building very, very early on, before the funding was in place to do the work. There were problems with this, and it's in part because the roof level on this building was raised after it was built. They kind of raised the height of the roof, and that's always caused issues with water getting in, and there's always been problems with the tops of the walls kind of pulling water down behind them, and as a result it's damaged this plasterwork that runs along the building. This whole section here has unfortunately had to be taken out and will be replaced, so one will be put back in to match what's there, but this was just one piece that we really couldn't save, so it's got to go back in. But this is it's interesting because it's already been patched up at different points in time, so some of the pieces that had fallen early on in the process of raising the money to do the work here, we expect on plasterwork to find things like animal hair and things in as a bonding material, but there'd obviously been some kind of repair work done at some point. There were bits of like old lace doilies in there and all sorts to kind of try and bond it together, but what we've had to do here is just take the whole section out and we'll make a new one and fit it back in. The plasterwork in here will still will be visible once the scaffolding's down. You'll be able to stand on the floor and see it all. The gold paint is a fairly modern feature, and we're not going to be putting all that back in. So there'll be little tiny bits of the design might be picked out in gold, but the majority of it will just be the plain white. And all the colour schemes that we'll be using through the building are based on what has been here in the past. So I think the church interior has been repainted 17 times in the last 300 years. So what we've done is looked at what each of those colours was and sort of picked one. I don't think it's the first colour scheme that was originally here, but it's one of the fairly early ones that we'll be recreating in the building. It will be colours that we now find quite pleasing, but also were used in that early time of the church was built in the Georgian times. So we're up in the roof space now, which is pretty special because it's not a bit of the building that really anybody accessed for a long time. One of the things we have done as part of the project is we've put in walkways with rails, which means that people can access it in future, particularly for repair and maintenance. People can come in safely and do work in this roof now if it's needed in future. It's a really beautiful space, but one of the things that's interesting in this roof space is the roof was lifted after the building was built. They increased the height of the roof, but they didn't take down the existing. So what you have here is the original roof joints and roof trusses, and then just sitting on the top of that there's like another roof support structure that's just been placed on the top of the original one. So it always, when you first come in, it looks really complicated, all the beams in every direction, but it's actually basically because there's kind of two roof supports in one. So I think we really have to share some of the challenges that there are of working on historic buildings, and that there have been with Holy Trinity particularly, and it's important to kind of acknowledge some of those. There's always problems when you do a historic building. You never quite know what you're going to find, what the extent of some of the problems with maybe damp or decay of your materials might be, so that takes time. There's always the fact that you've got to have really skilled people doing the work, and often that means people using hand tools, so it takes longer, there's no shortcuts. Sometimes there's a shortage of skilled people to do the work. So there's always kind of challenges to it. You're often working in awkward spaces, but obviously this year, 2020 has brought its own challenges. So we've had the challenge of trying to work through the COVID-19 pandemic. I feel like we've risen to that challenge, and it's been the whole team that's done that. So CCT has had to rise to that challenge, our contractor HPR Limited has had to rise to it, our architects have had to, everybody's had to kind of pull together and work out a new way to work. We were due to open the building, finish the work in autumn 2020. We're now looking at being completely finished and ready to open the doors and welcome people in spring 2021.